Hello. So I just like to, good morning. We at Lux Flag would like just to take a moment to thank you all for your support during these last difficult months since the tragic passing of Lux Flag's general manager, Sachin Bankalas. Sachin was a great human being and a tireless supporter of sustainable finance. He really exemplified Lux Flag with his passion, ambition, and drive to move to a sustainable future. So thank you again. As chairwoman of Lux Flag, I'm very pleased to see that after 2 editions, the Lux Flag Sustainable Investment Week has already gained recognition, and that is thanks to Lux Flag's associate members who are showcasing this week where they are in the sustainable finance journey. Given the finance industry is at different stages of that journey, this week is really about sharing best practices so we all advance towards the goal of making all finance sustainable. For this 3rd edition of LSIW, we thank you for such a positive response. We have over 3,500 registrations for the week. It's really amazing, and I'd like to thank our host partners and media partners. The 25 sessions over the week cover the latest trends and most pressing issues in sustainable finance. We certainly hope you find them useful and find inspiration in the progress being made to harness finance to help find solutions to our current environmental and social challenges. Just a couple of housekeeping points. The slides and the recording will be made available to you in a week or so. For questions, please click on the 3 dots at the bottom right of your screen, and we will try to answer those if we have time. And now I'm very pleased to introduce this session hosted by BNP Paribas and featuring specialist views on blended finance and private equity as 2 very important sources of financing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as broader sustainable development projects. Speaking on behalf of BNP Paribas today are Karine Litou, who is co-head Private Capital, BNP Paribas Securities Services, and Mélanie Hernaut, BNP Paribas Corporate Investment Banking Blended Finance Project Manager. Just one last reminder before I hand over to the speakers, please do ask your questions. Again, clicking on the 3 dots at the bottom right of your screen. And Mélanie, the floor is yours. Thank you.
To be there today, even if it's still a webinar and not a physical meeting, but hopefully it will be soon possible. But for this morning, still with video, but with smile and happiness, I would like, with Karine, my colleague, talk about blended finance and private capital. And we have a 3 objectives for this presentation. Next slide, please. The first one, to provide to all of you with an understanding of what is blended finance, what are we talking about, what is it, how does it work. Second, highlight the critical role of blended finance. What are we doing such kind of structure, for which purpose? And third, a focus on the role of private capital in blended finance. Next slide, please. Next slide again. Thank you. So I love to start with some definition and graphics to be sure that we are all talking of the same thing and understanding of what we are talking about. So blended finance is the strategic use of public and philanthropic funds to mobilize private capital flows in order to achieve sustainable development in emerging markets. So you have to keep in mind that there are 3 main characteristics for a blended finance transaction. First, we are talking of leverage. You need commercial concessional capital to mobilize commercial capital. Then we are talking of impact. Of course, underlying activities has to contribute to the SDG. And third, you have a return in this project. We are not talking of philanthropy or grants. A transaction is expected at the end to have a positive financial return. So in the graphic on this slide, I put the main characteristic. Of course, you will have the blended finance structures with both private and development capital to finance a project. Around this project, you will have usually technical assistance because you have to manage social and environment co-benefits. And you will have also other partners such as corporate providing offtake agreement. And so at the end, the objective for this project is to be, profitable in every aspect, financial, social, environmental, etc. Next slide, please. So blended finance, I want to insist on this point because it's very important. It's not a financial product. It's not another one. It's not a bond alone. It's a structuring approach in which you will bring public and private investor. So usually we have three main type of shareholders, and I put a complete board in this slide in order for you to understand that the objectives are not usually the same depending of the kind of stakeholders. So first we have aid, philanthropy. For these people are looking, of course, for social return. The risk appetite is very high. They don't need specific liquidity requirement in the structure, and they usually will work in the blended finance by putting in place grant, by granting concessional funds, or to provide guarantee. And in this category, you will find aid agency, donors, NGOs. Second, you will have impact and social investors, of course, and their objectives are slightly different. So they are looking for capital preservation, of course, social and financial return. They are neutral to risk adverse. They need some liquidity usually, and they will use equity, mezzanine debt, or structured debt to participate in this blended finance structure. In this category, we are usually talking of impact investment firms. And third main stakeholder, we are talking of commercial investors. And in this category, of course, you will find banks, institutional investors. They are looking for capital preservation. It's very important. Market returns. Social return consideration are also taken into account, but they are secondary. They are risk adverse and they need liquidity on their side. So they will provide equity, debt, mezzanine, or structured one. So really, blended finance will combine all these disparate approaches in one structure only, and each actor will have to take its own risk return profile, but also it will need to achieve its own objective. So the challenge is to really bring together these different actors to attain one common objective and respecting all the constraints of each partners. Next slide, please. Thank you. So blended finance can be adapted to all kinds of project, activities, and sector, and you can blend, I would say, across all a project life cycle. So, of course, at the beginning of any project, you will need maybe more concessional capital, and then you will decrease and decrease the concessional part in order to increase the commercial one. And the idea at the end is really to exit to a purely commercial project without any help or concessional capital. You can blend at different levels. You can blend directly at the project one. If we are talking of a huge project, it will be easier to blend directly at this stage. You can also blend at the fund level, because sometimes you have an addition of small projects which cannot be financed on a standalone basis because they are too small, or you need to create a fund in order to diversify the risk. So you can also use a fund, and of course we will have Karine that will explain you all this in the second part of the presentation. And you can even blend at the fund of fund level. So really, you can use different level, and depending of each situation, each project, we will select the best way to do it. Next slide, please. So I am talking a lot of blended finance. I think that now we all understand of what we are talking about, but what it is important. So next slide, please. Currently, there is an estimated SDG investment gap, which is estimated at 2.5 trillion of US dollar. And so this gap cannot be financed by public or philanthropy funds only. It's impossible. So we need the help of a private side, the private capital, and so by adjusting the risk return of a project, these public or philanthropic funds can help to attract these private sector resources and to help us to fulfill more rapidly this SDG investment gap. So I put some example because at the end, if you are using, for example, only 10% of the annual official development assistance budget to be allocated to blended finance with a 7 times average leverage ratio, you can mobilize around 105 billion of US dollar, and it's around 3 times the total MDBs and DFI finance in the private sector in developed country as of today. So really, the idea is to mobilize this private capital by using this public funds. Next slide, please. I list there in this small slide all the current barriers we are currently facing in order to invest in this emerging countries. I would say that only a very small portion of the funds are currently flowing to this emerging country, whereas they represent half of they represent a huge part of the needs where we need more SDG impact project. So we are facing usually challenging local investment. The local market are not working efficiently. We are facing weak or non-existent liquidity with high volatility. And in front of that, you have also private investors with limited mandate and incentives. They don't have the knowledge of this market, and sometimes the projects are also too small to be financed. So at the end, the returns are often not commensurate with the level of risk, real or perceived, and so no flows are going through this project. Next slide, please. So blended finance, really the purpose is to shift this risk and manage the returns. So at the left, you can see that we have a balance with, at the beginning, the situation we are facing too much more risk in front of the returns, which is expected. And so the purpose of the blended finance will have to find the right balance by shifting the risk. Public investor or donors can improve the credit worthiness of a project. They can grant some guarantee. They can increase the return. And so the purpose will have to find this balance to attract the private capital. Next slide, please. I put it in one graphic because I think it's always easier. So we are starting usually with a project, which is in my slide, the project A. Before blending, so you have an expected risk, which is quite high. The expected return is too low to attract the investors. And the purpose of a blended will have to move this point A to point B in order to de-risk the transaction, or to point C to increase the return in order to find the private capital we need in order to go on and to accept this kind of project. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in all this first part, blended finance is important to reduce the SDG investment gap. You can do it at all stages in all sectors, and usually as the projects are usually between 5 and 75 million of dollars. So you will need in that case to use private capital, create fund in order to aggregate all these small projects. And my colleague Karine will present you all the positive aspects of private capital in blended finance. Karine, I hope that I not speak too much and that will have time to present all your beautiful slides. Thank you for your attention. Karine, floor is yours.
Thank you, Melanie. Unfortunately, Karine, we don't hear you. Sorry. Oh, I think that sounds good.
Is it okay?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much, Melanie. I think you have really given a very good introduction to private capital linked to the blended finance. So Melanie has talked a lot about private capital, but in fact, what is private capital? So we can go on this slide. So private capital is linked to all non-listed assets. Okay, so it's really to invest into non-listed type of assets. So we have different type of asset classes into what we call private capital. We have private equity, which is really focused on investment into equity. It could be, of course, into a company at different stage of development of the underlying company. It could be through debt, private debt. So as mentioned by Melanie, you can have sometimes mezzanine debt, different type of debts, but you have funds which are really specific into investing into debt instruments. So you can have it with distressed debt, with direct lending. So direct lending, it's really a kind of a structuration of investment in order to bring really leverage. You have infrastructure, and I have chosen to really deep dive on infrastructure into the following slides because we are into the sustainable week. So I really wanted to put into relief the infrastructure sector just after. And you have also the natural resources. So all these asset class, you can build, in fact, a fund dedicated to invest into these non-listed type of assets. So a fund can bring diversification of risk, investing into different kind of companies, of projects, and so on. So it brings a lot of diversification for investors. But who are the investors who are investing into this kind of funds? You have insurance companies, you have foundations, you have sovereign wealth funds. You can have also what we call family offices. So it's really not retail people, but not very far from that, investing into this kind of fund with different type of objective, different type of returns. It can be capital gain, or it can be, in fact, yield or income, which are distributed by these funds, depending on the type of assets which are below. So here you can see that we have some evolution on the allocation of these final investors into these different type of funds, depending on their, in fact, strategy, into their goals, especially in terms of income or capital gain into their balance sheet. So you can see that we have really a strong trend into infrastructure. Most of all type of investors plan to increase their allocation into private capital funds, which are dedicated to invest into infrastructure funds. Through that, it's mainly pension fund, family office, insurance company, less sovereign wealth funds who are investing into this kind of funds. And you have also the pure, in a way, private equity, so really much more underlying non-listed companies. And you can see that there is also strong trend, especially from pension fund, family offices, or sovereign funds. This kind of funds, what is really important, that it's really linked to what Melanie presented you just before. They are closed-ended, meaning that investors can't decide to, in a way, to come in or come out when they want. They take a subscription under this fund, and after they are keeping their commitment until the end of the life of the fund. So depending on the type of asset, it can be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, especially in infrastructure, you're going to have some funds around 30 years, and investors should stay until the end. Of course, they can transfer their investment, but the size of the fund can be decreased. And this is very important in terms of project management and in terms of capacity, to do investment, and especially to bring, all the risk return that Melanie had just shown you. Of course, if the investors can exit when they want, this risk return approach and how to increase return or reduce risk is not manageable. So this is why these funds are closed-ended. If we move to the next slide, just a short focus on infrastructure. When we talk about infrastructure, in fact, we have different types of investments into infrastructure. We have what we call the greenfield. So the greenfield, it's a new project, is to finance a new infrastructure. So it can be so it's a new construction. By opposition to brownfield, which is something to rebuild in a way the infrastructure, but with an existing infrastructure. What is different behind? Of course, in both, you can have equity or debt in order to invest into this kind of project. But nevertheless, for a greenfield, it will be longer investment, and with a brownfield, it will be quicker. So depending on your strategy for an investor, they decide to invest more into greenfield funds or brownfield funds. Now we have really a strong trend with funds which are in fact a mix of both strategies in order to bring more returns to the final investors. Because with a brownfield, you're going to receive some incomes really quickly. So we can move to the next slide to give you an overview of the market evolution on infrastructure. So you can see that we have really a strong trend in terms of investment into infrastructure. This is really linked to the increase of allocation of investors who are looking to invest into this kind of project. It's really linked also to their ESG strategy, especially with infrastructure having some impact. It could be climate impact, it could be social impact. So this is why, as of today, we really have a strong trend in terms of investment into infrastructure funds. As you can see, we have a strong regional focus in North America in terms of assets leverage into this region, but also, of course, in Europe and in Asia Pacific. And most of the funds are multi-regional. This is really important. It's not just to focus on one region, but really to invest into the different regions depending on the type of project. So it's not really funds which are dedicated to one region. It can be, but it's not always the case, and they are really multi-regional in terms of approach. In terms of market perspective, if we move to the slide 16, why investors are really looking to invest into this asset class? Of course, to bring some returns. It's also a strong trend in terms of environmental, climate impact, and so on, so linked to their ESG strategy. But also there is a very low volatility and low correlation to listed equities. So it's a very good way for them also to diversify their approach, their portfolio in terms of investment. And with a long-term view, so really a long-term investment approach, it's a very good way for them to align both their ESG strategy and also their target in terms of risk return for their allocation of cash. Very stable cash flows into this kind of funds because especially on brownfield, of course, you need to rebuild the infrastructure, but nevertheless, it's very stable cash flows through the period. Linked with inflation, it's in fact, as of today, it's much more a protection against inflation because it's really linked to project financing and to rebuild some new infrastructure. So a low link with inflation. And of course, higher expected returns against, I would say, the listed, so very low volatility, very stable, and again, a very good way to align with their ESG strategy. The other trend that we can see into the market, it's really an increase of the size of the fund. So, of course, to invest into a project, you can mix private and public money in order to finance a project, as Melanie mentioned to you. Nevertheless, what we can see is that now the funds that decide to invest into this kind of assets are really increasing a lot. And what we can see is what we can call now some jumbo funds. The size of the funds have really increased a lot, and it has been multiplied by 2.4. So it's really a strong market trend. It's both linked to the increase of the size of the project to be financed, and also, of course, to the allocation of the final investors who have really increased their allocation into this sector. So here you can see some size of the funds. You can see some BlackRock, KKR funds which are above 4 billion of USD. You have also QT, KKR, and so on. And sometimes these funds are very specialized into some type of assets in terms of financement of infrastructure. In fact, this strong increase of the size of the fund is not specific to infrastructure. As of today, we can see that we have also the increase of the size of the fund for private equity and also for private debt. And the funds, we have, in fact, very small funds, very dedicated to some type of investment, but also jumbo funds, which are raised by large management companies and very, I would say, above 5 to 10 billion of USD. This trend is really new into the market, and it's really linked to the increase of allocation of institutional investors in this asset class. But we are talking about funds, but in fact, how a fund, is working. So we can go into the slide 17 with the fund structuring approach. A fund is really to diversify, of course, the assets, because the fund is going to invest not only in one project, but into several projects. And the investment strategy is defined into the bylaws of the fund. Of course, the management company need to monitor very closely this investment strategy, which has been defined. And investor decide to invest into the fund, challenging the investment strategy of the different management company to be sure that the investment strategy is aligned to their objective. So this is really important, because the final investors, in fact, they decide to invest into one fund or to another one, depending on the investment strategy, but also depending on the track record of the front office team, because as it is non-listed assets, the due diligence that they are going to do on the different projects and so on is very critical. And so, the capacity of the teams to analyze the project, to monitor it, it's something which is very important for the final investors deciding to invest or not into a dedicated fund. So, in fact, we have a very specific vocabulary also around private capital. We have what we call the limited partners, which are the final investors. We have the management company with different legal entities. And usually we have fund structuration with different underlying companies before investing into a fund. This whole structuration has really, in fact, increased in terms of complexity, which is linked also to the size of the fund and depending also on the region where the investments are done, because the investment can be done really through the world. So depending on where the final investment is done, the structuration in order to invest into the non-listed assets evolve depending on the type of fund, the different regulation into the different countries, and so on. But I don't want to be too complex on the fund structuration, so I propose you that we go on the fund life cycle on the slide 18. So here it's really to give you an overview how a private capital fund is running. As it is closed-ended, meaning that we have a start and we have an end, in fact, to this kind of fund. So we have different period of time during the fund life cycle. We have the creation with also the fundraising. So it's a period on which the management company is looking for final investors in order to invest into the fund. The closing, it's when the investors are entering the fund. And in fact, after this closing, the investors can't exit. And you have after investment and divestment period, depending of course of the funds. If it's a fund which will go until we say 10 or 15 years, the investment period will be for 5 years. If you have a fund and I would say with a duration of 30 years, the investment period can be up to 10 years, depending really on, I would say, the duration and the type of assets in which the fund will invest. And after you have the liquidation. So it's a period on which the funds are going to sell their assets. It will be the end. And after, the investors are going to receive some distribution based on the exit that have been done. So really, what is important is, as mentioned by Melanie, it's not philanthropy behind. You need to have some return, to have capital gains. And so this is why you have this life cycle with a beginning and with an end. And after, of course, investors can decide to come into another fund, another vintage, and to start again, this full journey. As you can see, depending on where we stand on the fund life cycle, there are some different needs. There are some needs linked to asset servicing. So in fact, this is what we do in BP2S, but you have fund financing, asset project financing. So it's linked to what Melanie had just represented you through the investment bank, FX hedging, and so on. So really, you can see that depending on where we stand on the fund life cycle, there are some different needs. And the funds need really to have strong partners in order to be able to monitor all their assets and to be sure that they will, monitor very well their investment strategy. So there are different needs. It can be asset servicing, it can be project financing, and so you can see that a fund, it's not up and running alone. They need a lot of different partners around them in order to fulfill this strategy. So I think we are on time. So we will be very happy with Melanie to take all the questions you could have on this blended finance and private capital topic that we have just presented you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Karine. Thank you, Melanie. Melanie, maybe I could start with you. Back on the slide where you were showing the stakeholders and where you noted the commercial investors, and what they were looking for: capital preservation, market return, and social returns are secondary. Do you see that changing? I mean, do you see today that there's more interest from the commercial investors in those secondary but very important returns, i.e. the social and environment returns, hopefully?
Yeah, we see a lot of interest, but all kind of actors, commercial investors, have their own constraints. If we are talking of insurance company, for example, they have some liquidity constraints, and so of course they are happy, and everybody is looking at these opportunities and this SDG project in impact. But they have also to fulfill their own constraints, because there are some regulatories and some coming from the company itself. So in blended finance, what is critical is to really understand the constraint of each of the partners and what we are looking at, and to understand perfectly what they need also in order to structure the solution the best way possible in order to achieve the objective. But yes, of course, and hopefully we see a lot of interest for all partners in this SDG impact project, but always with a lot of constraint, and they have to be taken into account.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so do you see, just in general, do you see more take up though of the blended finance model? Because as you mentioned, it's very powerful in terms of the leverage elements of it, and also the location of where the projects are taking place.
So yes, it's powerful. In theory, it's a wonderful product and not product. So way to approach the issue. But we have also to keep in mind that it's not an easy journey. So because you are putting together different actors, different partners. Of course, you have more power, but you have also more constraints. So you need a strong PMO project manager in order to achieve and succeed in this kind of project. I think that they are critical for all what is related to transition aspect, because we are not at a stage where a new technology or new type of agriculture is profitable. So you need this public or philanthropic help in order to go through this transition. So yes, I strongly believe that it's a wonderful and powerful way to structure the project, but you have to keep in mind that it's not the easy way. And so a lot of work, a lot of coordination. We are talking of different entities, different countries, different structure in terms of legal constraint, etc. So a lot of work, and it's not very rapid. From my experience, you need, yes, there is a lot of work.
And I suppose as well that, you know, it's like anything, when it starts, it's a challenge. And then once people start hearing about the success, right, and the opportunity of these projects, that, you know, those are good stories to tell, and it can be, you know, it can help to get more to be involved in that. Is there a particular, you know, project or projects that you can point out, perhaps, you know, sort of that exemplify the best of blended finance?
I can give some example, and Karine will also maybe add some of their project. But on the blended finance team of BNP Paribas, we are working a lot of all what is related to, for example, the conservation of the coral reef. So we are looking at a fund for this preservation of coral reef. We worked also with Karine a lot with a fund related to the Subnational Climate Fund, and looking for some project in the waste and sanitation, climate, and nature preservation. And as I mentioned, it's not always a fund, so sometimes we are looking also for bonds on loan, so project around regenerative agriculture and cocoa in Ivory Coast. So there are so much to do that the list is very long. So, but maybe Karine, do you want to add some comment or specific project on your side?
Yes, thank you, Melanie. So yes, we have worked together on this kind of project, which I think are very in fact important. What we can see also from some actors is really some new funds, impact investing. With the definition of impact investing, it's sometimes very difficult to really identify what is impact investing, but nevertheless, we can see now more and more funds you know, trying really to have a strong impact. So it could be into some current countries which are, you know, investing especially on agriculture, on farms and things like that. So we can see more and more funds now investing into that. And we have also another trend. It's really some funds in order to invest in technology. So it's not really you know, like a coral, but in technology in order to fight against climate change. So in terms of research, in terms of technology investment, in order to find a new way to fight against climate change. So in fact, we can see really both. We can see some funds really dedicated on preservation in order really to have a strong impact, very quick impact on some critical topics that need to be addressed, and other type of funds in order really to invest into new projects, new ideas in order to fight against the climate change and all the negative impact that we have as of today.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question here. I think this one's for you, Karine. In a 30-year fund life scenario, what is the typical expected rate of return that the funds are looking for under blended finance? I guess that's for both of you. So, please.
I would say that yes, the expected return would be depending after on the type of assets, between especially, so 30 years, it's much more for infrastructure funds, much more on greenfield. And in fact, usually you have 2 periods into this fund. You have a first period until 15 years, and after you have another period from 16 to 30. In the first period, the target is really much more to distribute some yield around, the target is to be around 7 to 10% of yield. And after another period, which would be much more capital gain, and again with an expected or a target around 10 to 15%.
Okay. Melanie, anything you want to add, or obliged? But no. Okay,
On
thank
this slide,
you.
I did not work on a 30 years,
Okay.
so Karine has all the answer.
But Karine, just a quick question for you. So we've certainly heard a lot about the LTIF, right? The European Long-Term Investment Fund, which is, I guess, blended financing in many ways, I guess, but it also obviously brings in, the, retail investors, which is really a pretty unique opportunity. Is that something that you're seeing on your side, take up in LTIFs? I know there were some hiccups in the beginning as to how it all works, but...
It really depends on the country. In fact, as of today, we have really a strong trend regarding LTIF, especially in Italy. We can see a lot of LTIF funds there. Part also in Spain. In order really to be able to open this kind of investment to retail people. This is really, but through the world private capital, as of today, it's a strong trend to try to open private capital investment to retail in order that they can access, in fact, to this kind of asset class. In more, we have so this trend, so much more in the south of Europe. For really the largest fund that I have just talked about, they are pure institutional funds, so with no retail people into this fund. Or otherwise, if there are some retail, it will be through dedicated vehicles, but again with a closed-ended approach and not an open-ended. It's true that with an open-ended approach, usually you have a mix of strategy because you need to have liquidity. For people in order when they need, to get their investment back. So this, in fact, this kind of strategy, you have both the private capital with blended and also some liquid assets in order to provide the liquidity for the final investors. So it's much more on, I would say, institutional funds that we have more blended blended finance.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for asking my LTIF question, though. I think it's good to hear that there are some, because a few years ago there weren't many. So, Karine, maybe a question for you as well. I'll just go back to slide here, this slide. So there's a question from participants: why are foundations and endowments not significant investors in PE? I guess the person was surprised by that.
In fact, it's much more. So yes, sorry, I should have put maybe the legend more clearer. In fact, it's an increase of allocation. So it's not to say that they don't invest into this asset class, but it's really, a target of increase of allocation. So the dark green, it's really the type of investors who plan to increase their allocation into this kind of strategy. I would say it's for 2022 until 2025. And the ones which are in light green are much more to say that they are going to be stable or to decrease their allocation. And because they don't know exactly around 2022, 2025, but it's true that foundation and endowments, as of today, are much more focused on infrastructure investment and debt investment in order to to build their allocation strategy. It's not that they don't invest, it's just that as of today, they are focusing more on infrastructure funds.
Okay, thank you. I see another question here, kind of back to the point about return. So the question is where the general partner or limited partner has similar expected financial return due to their past experience dealing with private equity ventures. How tough is it to bring them together in terms of aligning their impact return, especially when most impact measurements are not standardized yet or when data is not available?
Yeah. So in terms of alignment, so it's true that for this kind of funds, they are close-ended. You need to rely a lot on, in fact, the track record of the front office team, on their knowledge and expertise. But after, it's true that I would say for a fund for 15 or 30 years, maybe the teams can decide to do something else. Into this kind of funds, you have some mechanism in order to align the interest between the LP and the GP. This mechanism, so it's in fact it's a performance alignment, meaning what we call the carry interest. So it's an allocation. When you have the fund, you're going to have, of course, the valuation of the fund, so an NAV of the fund. This NAV can increase or can decrease. But when this NAV increases, you have some rules in terms of allocation of the performances between the investors and between the management company, in order that, of course, most of the return will go to the final investors, to the institutional investors, but a part, if the investments are have performed very well, a part will go to the management company. So this creates really an alignment of interest, meaning that the management company members are going to invest into the fund. So it's not only that they will receive a return, it's that they invest their personal money into the fund. And so they are going also to take risk, personal risk that the front office team are going to take into this fund. And so in fact, it's an alignment of interest with the final investors, because of course, if you have if you put your personal money into the fund, you are very motivated, to do your best in order to have very good performance at fund level, and of course you're going to stay because you will need to have your money back. So this kind of mechanism really creates a lot of alignment of interest, and during the due diligence process, final investors, so institutional investors, insurance company, foundation, and so on, are also looking at who is going to get, this performance at fund level, because it's with this team that they will decide, to do to allocate their money. It's not just to allocate the money with just an idea of a fund. It's really that they are doing also due diligence on the management company in order to select the management company and to select the team who is going to do this investment. And with this money at stake, in fact, on both sides, level of investor, but also from the management company, it creates an alignment of interest.
Okay, thank you, Karen. That was an excellent explanation. And maybe if I could just ask one last question to Melanie, just in general, where do you think and when do you think, what do you think of the take-up of the blended finance model? Are you optimistic for it, or is it? I'm assuming you are. What needs to happen?
But it's true that it's not going as fast as we will imagine at the beginning. We want to do more blended finance project. We want to do higher project, and for the moment, the increase is in terms of number and size, it's not so as high as I would like to see or as I imagine, because yes, as I mentioned before, it's quite complicated to align all the interests, the parties, etc. But I think that doing more and more this kind of project is the start of blended finance. We will gain in experience. We will certainly put in place some platform in order to ease, because it's always difficult to find the junior piece, the mezzanine one. We are looking and calling a lot of people. Maybe with sometimes an experience platform with Emerge that will ease this project to find the right partners more rapidly for each kind of, because some geographies are more convenient for some kind of actors. They want to do more Africa or more Asia, and as soon as you know who wants to do which kind of project, where, under which condition, it will be more rapidly. for the moment, it's clear that we are still in the learning curve, but happy to be there and to learn and to hopefully, yes, increase the number of transactions, the size, and to speed the process, which is for the moment a little bit long, and we have not so much time for some of issues. So yes, crossing the fingers that it will be easier in the future.
Excellent. Well, talking about it's important as well, isn't it? And I think also telling the stories about good experiences and getting the word out too, obviously also very important. Well, thank you both very much. We're at the end, and Melanie and Karine, I really appreciate your input and really contribution to expanding our knowledge on what is and should be and a very important and powerful way to increase investments to meet all of the environmental and social goals, and as you rightly said, at the light speed that we're required to meet these goals at. So thank you again, and thanks to BNP Paribas for hosting this session. Thanks again to the LuxFlag team for making it all happen. And again, I'll end the session with a quote that we now understand that sustainable finance is not just another type of investment, it's a complete shift of mindset. So this is also important to our discussion today, of course. So thank you again. Our next session will start after lunch at 2 p.m. hosted by VP Bank. And the title of that session is Investing for Change, Sustainability is Key. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.